Hey guys, Caden here with Barlow Film Co. and today we're going to be reviewing a product called Dehancer. Now if you don't know what Dehancer is, it's a film print emulation plugin. Dehancer has reached out to me and they've asked me to make a review slash tutorial for them. I'm going to walk you through some shots that I've collected. I've already color matched them. I've gotten them to a Rec 709 starting point, and so we're going to use Dehancer on top of that. There are a few different ways that you can use Dehancer and integrate it into your workflow. I'll show you a few different examples of that. And also today we're going to be talking about the phone version of Dehancer. So if you want to emulate film in your photos, we'll be going over that briefly as well. And then from there I'll give you my final thoughts, what I recommend Dehancer, what I recommend it as a wedding professional, what are the pros, what are the cons, and then show you how you can support the channel, how you can support me, and how you can get a discount off of Dehancer if you decide to purchase it for yourself. And so with that, let's dive right in. Alright guys, so we are here in Davinci Resolve. Hello. As you can see, I've got my clips lined up here, and so I'm going to be walking you guys through grading each one of these clips. I tried to pick a good variety of lighting environments, of composition. This is a more challenging lighting environment. All I had on this one was a light on top of my camera, and so I thought this would provide a challenge as well. We got some direct sunlight here and some glaring, so we'll see what it's like to grade with some flares in the shot. So with that, let's get started. I wanted to preface this by saying that I'll show a few different ways of how to use Dehancer. There's some options where you just put Dehancer at the end. There's some options where you can actually grade your footage with Dehancer and go directly from converting your camera profile into a Rec 709 image profile. And this video is not a beginner's course on color grading. There's going to be some things that I'll reference that may be confusing to a beginner, but I'm going to try my best regardless to walk you through as best as I can. So let's go ahead and get started. For each of these clips, I have applied a primary light adjustment and a white balance adjustment. With any plugin that you use, with any LUT that you use, with any conversion that you use, you want to get your image to a base starting point. So we're not doing any creative grades yet. We've just done some small primary white balance and light adjustments to each of these clips to get them to a neutral image. And over here I have my Rec 709 node, which is a conversion from my camera raw or log profile to Rec 709 Gamma 2.4. There's a few different ways you can do this. You can use conversion LUTs, you can use Davinci Resolve's built-in color transform node, color space transform. And so I've chosen to actually use something called a phantom LUT, and I'll link these down in the description, but I found these LUTs to just be absolutely incredible. They're incredibly accurate. I found them off of a YouTube video of the guy who makes these, and I've just been very, very happy with them. I've tried CSTs, I've tried Gamut.io conversion LUTs, and those are pretty good too. But I've really loved these phantom LUTs. They're a little bit pricier, but again, I think they've given me the best results so far. And so yeah, that's what I've applied to each of these. We have a mix of Panasonic Lumix S5 footage as well as Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K footage. So we have some RAW and we have some Vlog. So before I continue, I just wanted to show you my color management settings. So we're working in a Davinci YRGB color managed timeline. My color processing mode is HDR Davinci Wide Gamma Intermediate, and then my output color space is Rec 709 Gamma 2.2. Now combined with a color space tag of Rec 709 and a gamma tag of Rec 709A, in the deliver page, I found these settings to produce the greatest continuity across all platforms like PC, Mac, iPhone, and Android. I found that my work looks the best across all of them with these settings. You can copy these if you want, but I just wanted to let you know about this before we went any further. I'm going to go ahead and disable my timeline because I don't need to see that. We'll click Z to make this full screen. And let's go ahead and begin with Dehancer. Now I'm going to show you one way, and that is going to be to place it after our Rec. 709 node. Remember, Davinci Resolve is a color space aware software, so in the node structure, everything you do over here is going to affect everything that happens over here. And if this is our output, this little dot, this is our input. So we want to make all our grades within the in and out points respectively. So all of our adjustments made to the source file are going to be before our Rec. 709 node, because again, we don't want to place these after, as that would change our Rec. 709 output. So we'll just leave this here. I'm going to do Alt-S to add a new node, and we'll come down. We're going to bring it in, drop it on, let it do its thing for a second, and boom. That is the tutorial. Thank you for watching. Yeah, no, this is not our final image. This is not the sauce that we want. Let's see what we can do here. Let's work with it. So we're not gonna mess with that. We're just gonna stay on Dehancer. So I'm gonna go ahead and relabel that. So we have a bunch of different drop-down menus over here, and I don't need to look at all of these yet. I think that can be a little overwhelming for someone who just opens the program. So I'm gonna hit Alt and click, and that's gonna close all of my menus right there. I am gonna open a few. I'm gonna open Input here, Film Developer, Film, and we'll open Expand and Print. The only reason I'm doing this is these are the core essentials of this plugin. Everything else are extras and things that I'll open as we go. Let's get started. Now, I mentioned there are a few different ways to use the Dehancer plugin and to integrate it with your film. And this is way number one. So we look at our input, and this is essentially referring to the footage that we're giving Dehancer. And so we are giving Dehancer a Rec. 709 image. We see our Rec. 709 conversion node right here. And so in Dehancer, the source is a Rec. 709 image. Now, if you were giving it a camera profile, for example, so let's say we disabled this Rec. 709 node and we just want to use our camera profile. Let's choose a camera. Let's choose our Panasonic Lumix camera. So we're going to go down to Panasonic, and we're going to choose Lumix S5 and then Vlog L. So it gives us a slightly different result, but again, I don't necessarily prefer this method only because I trust my Rec. 709 conversion more than I trust Dehancer's conversion from camera profile to Dehancer. So I'm going to go ahead and reset that at Rec. 709, and let's just move right along here. Now, you notice these settings are still in the input drop-down menu, and you see exposure comp, temperature comp, tint, defringe, and defringe radius. Exposure, temperature, and tint will allow you to make adjustments to your source imagery. So for example, if I didn't have this white balance corrector, I could do some white balance adjustments here. If I didn't have this primary, I could do some exposure adjustments here, but I don't need to do that right now because I've already balanced my image light-wise and white balance-wise. Diffringing will help eliminate the fringe around certain edges that create like a purple bluish halo. Sometimes that comes with cheaper glass, cheaper lenses. You'll see this purple bluish halo around super bright parts of the image, and diffringe will help eliminate that. So we don't have to make any adjustments here with our input, so we're gonna go ahead and close that down. And now the fun part. I'll take expand and print down. Film, this guy here, allows you to choose from a vast assortment of different film stocks. So you should look at this, play with your heart's content. There are so many film stocks that we will not be going through today because that could take a week. But I would implore you to go find which one you like. If you're following along, you can use the one that I'm going to use specifically, but if not, just find one you like. Again, we're editing some wedding footage here, and so I don't necessarily want a hyper stylized image. I was playing around with this earlier, and I ended up really liking the Kodak Vision 3, and I'm pretty sure it was 200T. Kodak is still producing Vision 3 film right now, and a lot of movies nowadays that are shot on film are shot on Kodak Vision. So if you want a realistic looking film emulation, I would suggest using one of the Kodak Vision film stocks. Once we've got our film stock picked, by the way, the T refers to tungsten, the D is for daylight. So let's go ahead and pick 250D. Yeah, I think that's the one I want. Let's do 50D, why not? Every profile behaves differently, and it's important to find what you like. So if I pull the slider left, it's going to change the look of the film stock. I'm actually going to go ahead and turn my grain off here because I don't need grain right now. And we will go to expand and print. Now, film is developed onto a print. Typically what you'll find with movies is that a movie is shot in a specific film stock and then it's printed onto a type of print. So a very common one is Kodak 2383. Another option is linear, which essentially bypasses the print module. You'll see if I disable it or enable it, nothing happens. Linear just means that you're skipping the print process and you're solely editing on top of that film stock look. And you can totally do that within Dehancer. If you don't want to edit on top of a print, you can just pick a film stock you like and then make it look pretty there. Today we're going to look at a few different ways you can do that. And this first one we'll pick a print medium. And so there's also a Fujifilm and there's also a Kodak Endura. And Kodak it's a little less stylized, I should say. And so we're gonna work with Kodak. So let's go ahead and look at our expand settings. Now expand will allow us to set our black and white points within our scene. So if you're working with too much contrast, if you're not working with enough contrast, you can set your black point and your white point to where you want it. And so let's go ahead and set our black point. I'm gonna see how low we can go here without clipping. So I'm dragging that right. Looks like we're clipping there. And I also want to show you a little handy tool that you can actually get from Dehancer for free. But if we go down to monitor, we can actually click on clipping indication. And this will tell us if we're clipping in any areas and we're losing information. And that's the blue part right there. And we don't want that. We don't want to lose information in our scene. We want to try and maintain that. So let's go ahead and bring this back where it was. I think in the beginning was perfect. That looks good right there. We're going to keep our black point right there. We'll disable it, enable it, see where we're at. Now let's do our white point. Let's go ahead and set that up. We don't want any clipping. It should turn red. Yeah, there we go. So there's clipping in the whites. I'm going to reset it. Slowly drag it up. You can always go too far and pull it back. Too far and pull it back. I do that all the time. It's a little too hot for me. So let's go ahead and zoom in. I'm just playing with this here. That looks good to me. Okay, that's expand. We'll get to film compression in a second, but let's go down to print. Now when I change these settings on print, for example, exposure, tonal contrast, color density, and saturation, these will affect how the print is displayed. These settings, we are affecting the print. We are not affecting the film stock or the source material. We'll go to exposure, see what we're working with. And since, look, we already set our white points, we're gonna get a ceiling here to where our whites are not going to clip above that and they're going to try and roll off at the top. Because again, we've already set our white point back in the film expand section. Let's see if we need to make any adjustments to our exposure. Maybe I'm not making massive sweeping adjustments. I think a tendency for amateurs or beginners are to make these massive sweeping adjustments and you just don't need that. We're not doing a lot here. Let's see what we can do with tonal contrast. Again, this is going to change the contrast of the print that we're working with. Bring that down just a tad. Maybe exposure come down as well. So color density, it changes colors on a perceptual level. It's not technically increasing saturation. That's our saturation slider here. But color density is going to give your colors a rich tone to them. So it's going to lower the luminance value slightly and it's going to deepen those colors. I don't know the technical specifications of how that works. We're gonna mess with that here. Let's bring it up slowly. You can tell, look at this dress here, look. See a little bit of a difference there. A little bit of a difference. Yeah, we're gonna look at our saturation. We don't need to dial this back right now. We're gonna go back up to Film Developer. Film Developer allows you to essentially change the properties of the film stock itself. Enable it. So start bringing that back, bringing it forward, see what we're working with. Yeah. We'll just add a little bit. Gamma correction will either shift your midtones either to the shadow side or to the highlight side. So we're gonna shift them a little bit towards the highlights, and you can't see much of a difference because our midtones are shifted a little bit to the left on the spectrum already. Color separation, we're gonna leave at the top, but if you wanted to mess with this, you can. And we're gonna color boost it. Let's add some more saturation in here. Right now, I'm watching their dresses and their skin tones. So if I go too much, that's what we get. So we are gonna bring that back. We're gonna slowly slide her up. And this certainly is a dance because when I am on color boost, I'm looking at the density of the colors, I'm looking at the saturation of the colors, and I may need to go down and mess with the print settings. So I may need to go down here. If we lower the saturation overall and we bring up the color boost, that's a technique you can use to get a nice saturated color dense image. Okay guys, so we've got a nicely saturated image. I like what we're working with here. It's time to move on to film compression. We're going to use film compression to see if we can get that filmic look, if we can add another ingredient into our sauce, so to speak. So let's go ahead and enable this. And first off, we're going to see a slight change in the dresses over here. Now, if you look at our waveform, you'll see what's happening. It's actually compressing, again, those highlight values. So if we enable it, you'll see here this drops just a little bit. If I drag it all the way to the left, we'll see these raise back up, which means it's no longer affecting our image. Vice versa, if I slide it over, it's going to affect the image in a more intense manner. And now we're going to keep this, let's keep this right here. And I mentioned this earlier, but with this tool, it's all about fine-tuning, and think of it like a dance. You're ebbing and flowing. It's a give and take. It's a push and pull. And it's the same thing with coloring. So we don't want to just move this up. Oh, I'm done. Move this down. Great. Done. Over here. Done. Over here. Done. It's not an exact science. Every shot's gonna be different. Every film is gonna be different. It's up to you actually to just fine-tune a look that you like and a look that you want. So let's go ahead and bring this impact down. I don't want to impact it too much. And then let's go ahead and bring this white point down. This will allow us to change at what point our white point is affected. So if we bring this white point down, for example, and raise up our impact, we're going to see this affect our whites in a different way. Up, we'll see that our whites are affected even more because our white point has been raised, so everything underneath that is getting affected. But we're going to reset those again, bring this down to where I had it. And now tonal range will allow us to change, it's similar to white point, but tonal range will tell Dehancer how much of our tonal range, how much of our values from our brights to our darks will be affected. So if I bring our tonal range up, we'll see that more of our image is affected. If I bring it down, we'll see that less of our image is affected. We're going to bring this tonal range up. And again, this is a dance. So I'm looking at the dress, the highlights here, over here on the dresses, seeing what we're working with. I don't want it to look like an iPhone HDRI image, so I'm being very careful to fine-tune this just a little bit. If we disable it and enable it, we're making a big change here. If we look at the foreheads and the arms, big changes are being made here. Yeah, look at this over here. Look. It's just getting rid of some of that heat. It's bringing down our skin tones to a nice creamy spot, and I love that. That's what we want. We're going to bring that down. And now color density, if I raise this, will remove color from the highlights. So if I raise this up, it's very slight. If you look at our waveform, it's very, very, very slight. I'm going to control G to get this back where we want it. Yeah, make this full screen, disabled, enabled. That's what we're rocking with. Again, guys, it's a stylized image. I personally am starting to really like this. So that's film compression. We went over film, we went over film developer and our input. We chose our print medium and we changed our exposure and our tonal contrast. I may even go ahead and change our tonal contrast again. It's a dance. You can always go back and change these values. They're not set in stone. And so go ahead and do that. Color density, I'm really liking where that's at, but I might bring it down just a little bit. Saturation is a little hot. Bring it color dense up again. Okay. And those are our main settings. Now let's go on to color head. You'll see if I pull this left, we're gonna get a bunch of yellow. If I pull this blue, we're gonna get a bunch of blue. I actually am a fan of a little bit of blue. It looks like just to cool that down just a hair. Look at these whites here. You'll see. Just a difference. We'll look at that. Just a little bit of a difference. And all these sliders are the same up top. So magenta green, you'll find magenta green, cyan red. You can gang these together so you can move these in one spot to see what kind of effect you get here. If you wanted to shift a larger amount of values all at one time, you can do that. I don't want to do that. I may just add that blue we were working with a little earlier. The hair's looking more natural to me, and I'm liking that. Just taking some of that yellow out of there. Now let's go down to shadow tone, mid-tone, highlights, and preserve exposure and impact. And if I take down shadow tone, it's gonna add some blue into the shadows. If I raise this up, it's gonna add some warmth into the shadows. Similar with mid-tones and highlights. It's really singling out those mid-tones there. And highlights are gonna be the same thing. Preserve exposure allows you to maintain a certain exposure within color head. So for example, if I wanted to maintain exposure while I'm changing all these values, I would make sure the slider is at 100. If I didn't care about the exposure changing when I change these color values, I would bring the slider all the way down because typically The way light works is if you remove color or you add color, the luminance values will also change. And so this slider allows us to change that. And then impact, as we saw before, will allow us to change the impact that color head has on the final image. So if I bring this down, you'll see our yellow comes back. If I bring it all the way back up, we'll see our blue come back. And I want to keep there. Let's see what we're working with right now. I'm liking this so far. I just realized there's no way we're going to get through all of these shots. So that's color head. Now, let's move on to film grain, halation, and bloom. Now, when you think of film, I would imagine the first thing that comes to your mind is grain or halation. When you think of, like, for example, if I'm thinking of Pirates of the Caribbean in my head right now, and I remember a shot when Jack's on his ship. He's on the Black Pearl, he's in Davy Jones' locker, and it's a shot where he's looking right, and you can very clearly see all of the grain. And that just really stuck out to me because I'm like, oh, this makes this feel like a grittier image, like a more grounded image. Let's go ahead and see what we can do here with some grain. Now you have a bunch of different options, 8mm, 16 and 35 and 65. I'm gonna mostly live in the 35 only because the 8 and 16mm grains are very in your face. And so if you want an in your face look, I would suggest going with one of those. But let me show you another thing. If I select a 35mm, let's do an ISO 500. That's gonna give us a more in your face grain, but it's still 35, so it's not as intense as an 8mm or 16. So we're gonna do 35mm and let's enable it. Yeah, do you see how much of a difference that made? Look how grainy that is. Way too grainy, but we are getting somewhere. Now, this is too much, so I would pull this back. I would take this amount slider and pull it back. And now if I reduce it all the way, we're gonna get a very fine grain. Now if I increase this, we're gonna see it start to get bigger and bigger and bigger. But one of the cool things I wanted to mention about Dehancer's grain emulation is that instead of just slapping on an overlay, a 4K grain overlay that you find on YouTube, which I've done before, Dehancer's grain will actually enhance or dehance the image resolution. So for example, let's keep this at the standard amount. Let's go to like a 50 ISO. And then we're actually gonna go to custom. So this setting allows you to change the settings within the selected film grain profile. So we're gonna go to custom, and we have a bunch more settings to play with: size, amount, film resolution, shadows, midtones, highlights, and chroma. Let's just start at the top. Size will allow us to change the size of the grain. So for older film stocks, you're gonna see that the grain is much bigger. If I bring the size down, we'll get much finer grain. Personally, it's not my favorite, only because now it looks like noise. Now let's go to amount. That's essentially the slider that we were just working with before, and so this will allow us to change how much grain is in our image. And let's bring that down to a nice, yeah, let's do 10, why not? Now film resolution allows us to change the film resolution on a level that's like I said, way more detailed than just a grain overlay. So for example, let's look at her, let's look at these hairs on the top of her head here. And let's bring this film resolution all the way down. This is it. We're reducing the resolution with film grain. We're not downgrading the footage. We're not making it look like crap because we're exporting at 720p. We are giving it the sauce treatment, okay? We are reducing the resolution size with grain. And conversely, if we bring this up, you're gonna see that detail come back. Watch right here. I mean, even look at the eyes and the mouth. Look at the eyes and the mouth here. Bring it down, slide it up. We're getting somewhere. We are definitely getting somewhere. I'm gonna bring this up. Let's keep it right here because I don't want to lose too much resolution. This was shot in 4K, but again, I don't want to go over the top. Shadows, midtones, and highlight sliders allow you to change how much grain is in that specific field. So for example, if I didn't want a ton of grain in the shadows, let's say I have a really noisy image and I didn't denoise or I didn't do anything to get rid of the noise, and then I had to add grain on top. To me personally, that doesn't look the best. So let's find I click Z to go back to start. Let's pick a shadowy part, which seems to be right here. It's pixel peep. Let's bring the shadow slider up. Yeah, we'll see that major increase in the shadows here. And we'll see it on our waveform here. Now let's bring this out. Yeah, do you see our waveform clear up? I actually really like that there's not a bunch in the shadows. I want some, not a bunch. Midtones, I feel the same. I don't want a bunch in the midtones. I love those buttery skin tones. Let's do just a little bit. Highlights, we will keep, let's look here. That's kind of hard to tell. Yeah, let's do it right here. Highlights will bring down, yep, just a little bit. Yeah, there we go. Chroma will allow us to add in colorized grain, similar to how digital cameras have colored noise. So for example, let's bring the amount all the way up. If the chroma slider is all the way up, you'll see a bunch of artifacting here. If I bring it down, you're gonna see no colored artifacting. I'm pretty sure regular film does not have chroma grain, but I could be wrong on that. I could be wrong, don't quote me. So to play it safe, we're gonna add just a little bit. And then let's go ahead and bring this amount down to, let's do 15. Let's see what we're working with here. We are dehancing the resolution, we're adding some grain, and at the end of the day, what we're doing, we're adding sauce. We're just straight up adding sauce. Now, some of you may prefer the Rec. 709 image, and that's totally fine. Again, not every project calls for something like Dehancer, but I really think we're getting somewhere. We're getting those nice deep colors that we want. We're getting those nice deep, rich skin tones. Look at her arm, look at, I love it. Look at this. Just got a tricep too. It's so good. It's just deep. Anyways, let's move on to halation. Now, halation is a buzzword used by many, but simply what that means is when the red channel on film passes through and it creates this halo-like effect around highlights and high contrast areas. So for example, if you want to add some warmth in your skin tones, this is a very easy way to do that by turning on halation. I'll explain why in a second, but if we turn the amplify down, it turns off. We turn it up, we're gonna see a lot of stuff start to happen. See a bunch of that come into your eyes. I don't necessarily want that. I just want it around these higher contrast areas. So let's go ahead and similar to film grain, we can actually change the properties of our halation. So let's choose Super 35. We'll enable it and disable it, see what we're working with here. And then we'll go into custom. So source limiter will eliminate sources under or above a certain threshold. So for example, if I didn't want the skin involved, let's see if we can make that happen. So let's turn up, amplify is gonna be turned up. If I bring the source limiter down, more things are affected. Look at these eyes here. If I bring it up, we'll see the eyes no longer be affected, and that's what I want. I don't want to affect the eyes. So we're gonna keep actually source limiter where it was at 15. Background gain will give us some more brightness here, but we're gonna leave that there. I like where it was at. Bring it down a little bit. Smoothness will smooth out the halation around certain areas. If we go into mask mode, we'll see this black start to show up. Yeah, that is the halation, and I'll show you. So let's go over to where we're seeing that. Yep, let's go over here. So local diffusion, as you can see, will expand the halation in a localized area. So look at her shoulder here. Yeah, there we go. And I want to keep that right on that shoulder. Global diffusion will give us a larger field that halation affects. So for example, if you want it to affect the skin tones, raise that sucker up. But that is way too much. Definitely don't like that. I do want it to affect the skin tones a little bit. So let's do that. Let's keep that just a smidge high. It's very easy to go too far with halation. So we really do not want to go too far. Yeah, look at their skin. Look at their skin just warm up just a little bit. So that's a technique to warm up the skin. Dehancer actually recommends that if you want to add a little bit of oomph to the skin, that's a way to do it. Let's change our hue here. So if we want our hue to be different, whether on the cooler side or the warmer side, this is how we would do it. It will let us impact the image on a greater scale. So for example, if I bring it up, all this adjustments and settings we made will change. And what's really cool is you'll notice as I bring the impact up or down, the grain changes. And another win for Dehancer's grain. As I make all these changes, the grain will change with it. We're gonna lean for the impact where it's at because I'm happy with this halation right now. It's adding some warmth, adding some warmth where I think it is totally welcome. I don't know if you've heard of a black Promise filter, but a filter attempts to recreate bloom. I'm not a huge fan of the Promise filter anymore, only because I like having the flexibility to recreate it later and not have the Promise filter baked into my footage. This wedding was actually shot with a Promise filter on and it turned out really soft, and I just wasn't a huge fan of that. So I like recreating that later. And so let's go ahead and add this on. You'll notice it does a little bit to our image. Look at the hair and look at around the dress. But if you're going for that ethereal, dreamy feel, bloom is definitely the way to go. We're gonna take this off. That's what it's like. If I amplify it, way too much. But that's the effect that you're getting. It's a very pleasant blooming effect. And so again, if you wanted to change those settings, you could. You can go to the highlights, the source limiter, details, diffusion, amplify, save lights, saturation, and impact. All of these settings will change how the bloom operates. So if I wanted to affect the highlights, I can change the slider. If I want to affect how much of the source is being affected by the bloom, I would raise this up, and I kind of like that not too much is affected. Details allows me to create a smoother or more detailed bloom. Diffusion allows me to diffuse the bloom across a greater area of pixels, and so it's not as pinpointed the higher you go, but we'll leave that where it's at. Amplify, again, will amplify the amount of bloom that's there. Save lights will preserve the luminance of the highlights, but if I want to save the highlights, I'm going to bring this up because I like that film compression that we enacted earlier. Saturation will allow you to saturate or desaturate the bloom effect, and then impact, again, allows you to change how much impact bloom has on the final image. So again, little adjustments. Boom. Okay, let's keep moving here. Film damage allows us to add a film-like damage to our image. So Dehancer has gone through the painstaking process of emulating film damage, and it's really, really good. I will say it's really taxing on the computer, and typically if you want to add film damage to a project, I would recommend adding this on last or enabling it last. So we can enable it right now. Let me see if you can get a idea of what it's doing here. Let's do a Super 8. I want to really exaggerate this, and let's increase this total amount here, and let's see if we can watch this. Very subtle. You'll see a bunch of little pieces here and there. My computer can't handle it. But film damage doesn't look good by itself. It always looks good with film breath, gate weave, and overscan. And let's go ahead and walk through those. I'm going to disable this here. We'll go to film breath. And when film is passing through the gate, the exposure will change based on the film running through the film gate. And so they've added this effect to essentially do just that. So if we leave the impact at 100, let's go ahead and change this 16 to accentuate this feature, and we'll see the exposure change. And you'll notice the colors are changing too, because again, when exposure changes, typically color will change as well. I don't know if you can see that, but it is shifting a little bit. And so if you want a realistic way to emulate film breath, there it is. We'll disable that for now. Gate weave is Dehancer's way of emulating the jittering and shaking that happens. So if we enabled gate weave, it'll crop in and it's going to jitter just a little bit. Let's do 8mm, see if I can really accentuate that. Yeah, there we go. You see that shaking? It's almost like a handheld effect, but for film. So if you want a realistic way to emulate gate weave, there it is. Let's disable that. And let's move on to overscan. This is something that really sells the film look. So if you've ever seen 16mm film or Super 8 film or regular 8mm film, you'll often see them with an overscan. But let's go ahead and pick let's do Super 8. What's really trendy right now in the wedding industry is shooting on Super 8 film. So let's go and try and emulate that within our Dehancer plugin. Let's enable this. See what we're working with. Yeah, look at this blue. Let's go ahead and turn our clipping indication off. Look at that. And look, you'll see the light change here. If I play this, again, it's really heavy in the computer. But look, it's gorgeous, beautiful. Wow, really, really cool. Let's go in and change some settings here. So you can choose your gate type. So we've got Super 8, Standard. Let's just walk through these here. This is Super 16, Ultra 16, Super 35. So we've got our gate type. We can do a gate shape, so we can do neat normal, and we'll look at these corners here. So it's kind of neat sharp. These will give us sharper edges, and then we can do rounded edges, or we can take it off completely. And that's what you get. That's another look you can have. I don't know why you would want that. I'm a little ignorant towards this part of the film process, but for someone who does know, let me know in the comments. I'm really interested in that. This is our perforation mode. We can choose a negative or a positive scanning method. And so if we wanted to do a positive scanning method, it would look like this. But we are gonna leave it at negative, and then we can change our exposure. And you'll see this change around here. Guys, it's just, this plugin is incredible. It's so versatile and flexible, and I'm here for it. We can change the scale of our overscan, so if we wanted to make it bigger, we can totally do that. If we wanted to add some defocus because of the gate overscan, we can do that. So if we look around the edges, it's gonna add some depth to our emulation, and that's what we want when we're trying to recreate a proper film emulation. And so that is overscan. We can also flip this to the other side, and if we disable static gate, this will allow the gate to move in jitter. So if we use this in tandem with our gate weave, our film breath, and our film damage, what you can get is a very realistic looking film emulation. Okay, let's go ahead and move down to vignette. So if I change the exposure, we'll see what it does there. If I change the exposure over here, we'll see it darken up the image real nice. Now the size will allow you to change the size of the vignette. If you want to make it larger or smaller, you can do that, and it will affect a larger part of your image or a smaller part of your image. I would leave the feather at 100 for me because I don't want a weird vignette like this. If you want to change the aspect ratio, for example, like this, you'll see that there's differences there. But I was pretty happy with what we had here. So if I enable it, disable it, we get that. Exposure's too much, so I just want a slight effect. I might even raise that up. Just get a little sauce. We want to make sure that is enabled if we want to use a vignette, and then from there we can go down to our monitor, and again, I mentioned this earlier, but we have our clipping indication so you can see if anything's clipping, and nothing seems to be clipping. And then we have our false color. This is actually really, really helpful because it can tell you where your midtones or where your skin tones are sitting. Those are our monitoring tools. You can actually, I'm pretty sure, get those off of Dehancer for free. And then we have our output, which will allow us to change the total impact that Dehancer has on our final image. Now, I either recommend using this at the beginning of your footage and changing the impact right out the gate and then making all your adjustments following that, or I would recommend using it at the end, assuming you're not using something like overscan. So if I change our impact, let's say to 50%, and I change our overscan to, we'll keep it at Super 8. You'll see it creates a weird opacity difference, and that's not something that we want. So if you're not using overscan and you're not using something like grain, for example, I wouldn't want my grain to be affected by opacity. I would rather use something like amplify. I'm gonna leave that at 100 because I'm pretty happy what we got. I'm happy with this. Again, it is very stylized, but I'm happy with it. So that's our output. Now I could recreate this effect with any of these nodes if I wanted to. I could go to our node key and change our key input or output and change that here and change it all the way down or keep it all the way up. That's a technique I use often. But anyways, that's a way you can do that outside of Dehancer. We have our LUT generator. So if you wanted to use all of these settings as a LUT and export that and use it again, you can totally do that. And then you have further options here if you want the quality of your playback to be normal and fast, or if you want the Dehancer to be a super high fidelity with slower performance, you can choose that option. I just wanted to elaborate on how I would use this in a real world setting. If I wanted to use this across multiple clips, here's how I would do it. Let's say these were all clips from the same sequence. I could select all of these and add it into a group, and I already have one made, so we'll just do Dehancer test, and we'll assign it to our group. And so now all of these clips are in one group, which means any changes that I make on a post-group level will be applied to all of these clips. Similar to how you would add an adjustment layer on top of a clip or top of a group of clips, you can do that in Davinci with groups. So if I was gonna apply our Dehancer effect, So everything, you can probably guess where this is going. I would copy this. Let's disable this because I don't want this duplicated twice. And then I would go to our post group and I'll paste it. And it's going to look the same here, but now it's going to look different on all of our other clips. Look at this. Now we have Dehancer on this clip. Boom. Look at that sauce. Look at our skin tones. As you can probably tell, there's too much bloom because I shot this with a Pro Mist filter. And so again, this is why I don't really like shooting with Pro Mist filter anymore. But look at this. Look at our greens. We're subduing the greens a little bit. We're bringing some life into the skin tones. A little bit of contrast, not too much. Look at the halation on her nose. Look at this. Halation. Yeah, there's a better idea. Look at that. Before and after. It's just softening the girly skin tones. A lot of brides, that's what they want. And we're just giving it some sauce. Let's look at the next clip. Yep. We got a cooler tones here. Pay attention to her jacket. Watch. Look at that. Look at the blues. Look at our nice blues. Now again, guys, every film stock is going to affect these color values differently. So that's why I would encourage you to play with the different stocks. Find one you like. Find one that you like for different scenarios. That's a lot of where Dehancer's power comes from, is being able to give you that flexibility. Here's another shot. More blues. He's actually wearing a green suit here. We're losing that a little bit, but I'm okay with that because we're tightening up this outside part here, bringing in that environment a little bit better. Let's look at our glass here, before, after. What I could do is probably bring our gamma up, just a little bit. And we're still going to have a little bit of clipping, but for these purposes here, I'm okay with that right now. On our next shot, we do have some clipping in the highlights, I know that. Yeah. 3/4 of a stop. There we go. So again, it's a dance, guys. I mean, if you apply a post-group effect like this, you're going to have to change some things on a clip level. So you see what we're doing with the sky here? We're no longer clipping that sky. But look at this. Look at what Dehancer's doing to this guy. Look at the arm. You got to find the frame that doesn't have the glare on it. Because again, I don't want to edit on this frame. The first frame is not always what I call the hero frame. Someone else called it the hero frame and I inherited it. I would say this is our hero frame because we don't have a glare. So let's see what it's doing here. Look at these greens. Look how deep they are. We're losing some of that vibrancy, but we're gaining this deep richness, adding some contrast, getting that little sauce. Look at this golden. Now this is noon. Now this is golden hour. Look at this. It is making those yellows beautiful. And look at what we have here. I went ahead and actually added a vignette to this because their faces were too dark. And it actually changed our white balance just a little bit. It was a little blue. Little blue, but look what Dehancer's doing here. Look at the skin. Look at this. Look how deep and rich that is. I love that. I would deliver this. So anyways, guys, that is Dehancer. I hope you liked the walkthrough. I know this was a long one. I didn't expect it to be this long, but I love doing this. I love playing with this. I can sit in here for hours and use different looks, different film stock. I just think it's a super versatile tool. Thank you for watching. Thanks for following along. I hope you learned something. I hope you're compelled to try out this tool and maybe even buy it. It's certainly a worthwhile investment. I've had a lot of fun using this. But for now, back to the talking head. Before I give you my final thoughts on Dehancer for Davinci, I wanted to walk you through the iOS app of Dehancer. And so I'll show you the main features, walk you through the interface, and I'll show you a before and after of a photo I edited within the Dehancer app. So once you open the Dehancer app, it's going to ask you to choose a photo from your camera roll. And so when you pick your photo, it's automatically going to apply some settings to that photo. And if you notice, this is very similar to Dehancer in Davinci. So we're going to pick a film stock here just like we would in Davinci. So let's go ahead and we'll do Kodak Gold 200. We'll click on that one. And then we're going to go over to edit and you can see all of our settings here, crop, source, films, etc. Very, very similar tools to that of Davinci. And so if we wanted to play around here, we could. So we could bring our exposure down. We're going to be editing on Kodak Endura glossy paper today. So let's do that. We'll bring our exposure slightly down. Mess with our tonal contrast here. If you'll notice, it's very similar to the Lightroom app
if you're familiar with that. We'll bring our color density up. It's a little too much. Bring our saturation down just a hair. We'll go over to our film developer. Give her a little bit of contrast there. Correct our gamma. Yeah, let's bring that up just a little bit. Leave our color boost where it's at. Let's go to our film compression. See where our white point's at. I think I like a little bit higher. Bring our impact down, see what we're working with here. I'm liking that. Let's go to our expand. Let's set our white point. Let's bring this up a tad. See where our black point is. Yeah, there we go. The app is a little buggy sometimes, but it seems fairly streamlined. I'm able to keep working on my photo if I want to. We'll go over, we have our color head, our film grain. Let's choose a 35mm ISO 50. If we zoom in, we'll see that really doing a good job here of adding that film emulation grain. Let's zoom back out. Before and after. I'm loving this. I'm loving the orange on this building. We have our halation. So let's see if we can find where this is being applied. Yeah, there we go. Let's go a little heavier on the halation today. Increase that smoothness a little bit. Get some global and local diffusion in there. Let's see how the bloom is looking on our model's face. Yeah, I like that. We'll add a slight vignette, and then that is our final photo. So as you guys can see, Dehancer on the phone is just as intuitive as it is on Davinci. I'm very happy that you can take your film emulation on the go on the phone. So if you guys are interested in downloading that and trying it out, it's on the App Store right now for you to download. And let's get back to the Dehancer review for Davinci Resolve. Okay, so let's talk about some pros. I would say number one, Dehancer is incredibly intuitive to use. It's easy to learn, it's easy to practice with, and overall it's something that you can pick up and figure out how to use and use well. My second pro is that Dehancer is incredibly flexible, and so if you wanted to add halation or bloom and you didn't want grain, you could do that. If you wanted to enable the film stock but disable the printing process, you can totally do that, and vice versa. I just think it's nice to have that flexibility, especially from someone who shoots in a way that gives me the most creative freedom and flexibility in post, and so I really appreciate that Dehancer gives you more freedom than it does limit you. I would say the third pro, and maybe this should have been my first, but Dehancer does an incredible job of actually emulating film. And so the Dehancer team, from my knowledge and from what I've researched and read, has done an incredible deep dive on what actually makes film film. And so you're gonna find that in this plugin. It's not necessarily a plug and play. You're gonna need to mess with some settings and find something that's gonna work for you. But all in all, I'm very pleased with the final product. Now let's talk about if I would recommend this product. I've been thinking about this a lot recently, and I just think it depends on your use case. So for example, if I'm an amateur and I'm just getting into color grading, I'm not doing anything for paid shoots, I'm not charging anyone, I'm really just trying to hone in my craft and I'm trying to learn and practice as much as I can. I don't know if I'd recommend Dehancer to you. As a beginner, it's so important to nail down the basics of color grading. I would recommend honing in your craft first before looking at a tool like Dehancer, because if you're tied to one tool, if you're a one-trick pony and let's say you buy Dehancer and all you know is Dehancer and you're not able to create looks outside of that, that would be a detriment to you, because not everyone is looking for the film look. Not every company, not every bride and groom is looking for this timeless, we'll say stylized image. It has the potential to pigeonhole your talents. And so if you're not worried about that, I would say go ahead and buy it for sure. Go ahead and give it a shot, use it on some projects. But I would just encourage you to experiment in color and use color outside of Dehancer for sure. If you're getting paid as a colorist, if you're getting paid as a cinematographer, Dehancer is an absolute win in any toolkit. It's certainly a plugin that can elevate your film and help your film stand out. And I've had a lot of fun using it. If you need a genuine, authentic way to recreate a film look for a project you're using, I would absolutely say yes. As far as price goes, I wouldn't necessarily say price is a con, because as I mentioned earlier, For someone who's just starting out and trying to get down the basics of filmmaking, Dehancer wouldn't be on my list of the top 10 things that a filmmaker starting out should invest in. I think it's an incredible tool. So price-wise, I think it's totally justified how much it costs for the entire suite. So for a professional or an intermediate filmmaker who's looking to elevate their films and they have $500, $500-ish to spend on a tool like Dehancer, I think it's totally worth it. Especially because if you're in that space, you're going to be making that money back, presumably from those films that you're using Dehancer on. So let's talk about some cons. My first con after using this tool for a few weeks is that it is pretty hard on your computer. It's a con in the sense that by the nature of how powerful the software is, there's going to be some bogging down of your machine regardless of what machine it is. Maybe one con I would say is that I haven't found many tutorials from Dehancer on how to use this product. Dehancer did send me a free version of Dehancer so that I could use it and play with it to write this review, and they did send me over some documentation, and I have watched some other reviews and tutorials, but I would love some tutorials from the Dehancer team. There's a lot of cool ways you can use this software, and I'm not sure that I'm using it to its fullest potential, or at least that I'm understanding it to its fullest potential and understanding how all the tools work together and how they work separately. So I would love to see a tutorial series from Dehancer on that, especially if you're a beginner and you've decided to purchase this product, or an amateur or advanced. Honestly, I love tutorials. I love following along, and so that's something that I really value, and I think others would value that too. If you wanted to try Dehancer out, you can use my code BFCO at checkout on Dehancer.com. That would really help me out. You can get $50 off your Dehancer purchase. And I think if you're in the wedding space, it's definitely a worthwhile investment.